There is a quiet divide in the modern world. On one side are people who wait to be taught. On the other are people who decide to teach themselves. The difference is not intelligence. It is not background. It is not access to information. The difference is a decision. A self-education identity is the decision to see yourself as the primary architect of your own learning. It means you no longer outsource your growth to school systems, corporate training, social media feeds, or chance exposure. You accept that your clarity, skill, and judgment will rise or fall based on what you deliberately study and practice each day. Most people consume information the way they snack. Randomly. Reactively. Whatever appears in front of them becomes their mental diet. A headline here. A podcast clip there. A trending video before bed. They confuse exposure with progress. The self-taught individual moves differently. Learning becomes intentional. Every input is chosen. Every hour invested has direction. Over time, this shift compounds into an extraordinary advantage. Consider two colleagues who begin their careers at the same time. Both are capable. Both have access to the same resources. The first relies on whatever training the company provides. He scrolls industry news occasionally and attends mandatory workshops. He assumes growth will happen naturally with experience. The second decides that his development is his responsibility. He sets aside 30 focused minutes every morning to study his field. He reads foundational texts, not just summaries. He tracks concepts he does not understand and researches them deliberately. He reflects on mistakes after projects and extracts principles from them. After 3 years, their resumes may look similar. Their minds are not. One operates on habit and repetition. The other operates on structure and insight. The gap widens quietly, then suddenly. The foundation of self-education is ownership. Without ownership, there is no consistency. Without consistency, there is no depth. Ownership also eliminates excuses. When growth is your responsibility, you stop blaming your environment for stagnation. Limited guidance becomes an invitation to explore. Weak management becomes a case study in leadership errors. A slow season becomes study time rather than wasted time. This identity shift changes how you interpret your day. A difficult conversation becomes a lesson in communication. A failed proposal becomes material for analysis. A successful negotiation becomes a model to dissect and refine. Life itself becomes curriculum. Taking on a self-education identity does not mean rejecting formal education or mentors. It means you no longer depend on them as your primary engine of growth. You extract value from every source, but you remain in control of direction and pace. There is also a psychological effect. When you see yourself as self-taught, you raise your intellectual standard. An intellectual standard is a personal benchmark for depth, accuracy, and rigor. It governs how thoroughly you understand something before claiming competence. It pushes you to verify instead of repeat. It pushes you to read beyond headlines. It pushes you to think instead of merely react. This standard becomes internal pressure, not stress, but expectation. You begin to notice when your thinking is shallow. You feel the gap between opinion and understanding. Instead of defending your ego, you study. One practical drill can anchor this shift. At the end of each day, sit in silence for 5 minutes and ask yourself one question: what did I deliberately learn today? If the answer is vague, choose one specific topic for tomorrow and define exactly how you will study it, even if only for 20 minutes. Write it down. When tomorrow arrives, complete that session before engaging in casual consumption. Repeat this process daily for 30 days. The repetition builds evidence that you are someone who directs your own growth. The world rewards visible performance, but performance is built on invisible preparation. Self-education is that preparation. It happens early in the morning, late at night, and in the margins between obligations. It rarely receives applause. It quietly restructures the way you think. Once you adopt this identity, comparison loses its emotional charge. You no longer measure yourself against others' highlights. You measure yourself against yesterday's depth. Progress becomes internal and cumulative. A person who waits to be taught moves at the speed of permission. A person who teaches himself moves at the speed of discipline. The decision is simple, but its implications are profound. You either treat learning as something that happens to you, or you treat it as something you build daily. That choice determines whether the coming years blur together or compound into rare capability. Ownership creates direction. Direction creates momentum. Momentum, sustained over years, creates mastery. Once you decide to become self-taught, a new problem appears. There is too much to learn. Information is no longer scarce. It is overwhelming. Articles, books, podcasts, courses, threads, opinions. Without structure, even a motivated learner drifts into intellectual clutter. Clarity becomes the next discipline. A learning filter is a defined standard that determines what information deserves your attention. It protects your time and your cognitive energy from being diluted. Instead of asking, "Is this interesting?" you begin asking, "Does this serve my direction?" Most people consume based on mood. They read what is trending. They watch what is recommended. Their curiosity is constantly hijacked by novelty. Novelty feels productive because it is stimulating. In reality, it fragments focus. Direction, not volume, produces depth. Clarity begins with defining the arenas that matter most in your life. Professional skill, communication, decision-making, financial literacy, leadership, health. The categories will differ depending on your ambitions, but they must be chosen deliberately. When you name your priorities, you reduce noise automatically. Imagine a young manager who wants to advance in her company. She feels pressure to stay updated on everything: market news, leadership trends, productivity hacks, economic forecasts, and industry gossip. Her evenings disappear into endless reading. Yet she feels scattered and unsure. One weekend she steps back and defines 3 core growth areas: strategic thinking, persuasive communication, and financial acumen. On Monday, her behavior changes. She declines random webinars. She stops reading general business news every morning. Instead, she selects one book on corporate finance, studies negotiation frameworks, and reviews case studies on strategic pivots. Within months, her conversations sharpen. She asks better questions in meetings. Senior leaders notice the difference. The total hours she spends learning may not increase, but the return on those hours multiplies. Clarity requires subtraction. Every time you say yes to one area of study, you are implicitly saying no to another. This feels uncomfortable at first. There is a fear of missing out, a subtle anxiety that something important might slip past you. Strategic ignorance is the deliberate refusal to consume low-value information. It is not laziness. It is discipline. It recognizes that attention is finite. When you ignore trivial updates and shallow commentary, you create space for sustained thought. A strong learning filter often rests on 3 questions. Does this build a core skill I have identified as essential? Does this deepen my understanding of a principle rather than just offering surface tactics? Can I apply this within the next month? If the answer is no to all 3, it likely does not deserve immediate attention. Clarity also protects your mental state. Random consumption creates internal noise. You carry fragments of opinions that were never examined. You repeat phrases you never tested. You feel informed, yet uncertain. Directed study feels different. It builds continuity. Each session connects to the previous one. Concepts layer on top of each other. You begin to see patterns rather than isolated facts. There is a practical way to strengthen this discipline. Set aside 1 hour at the beginning of each week to review your direction. Write down the 2 or 3 primary skills or knowledge domains you are currently developing. Under each, define 1 concrete objective for the week. Then create a simple rule. During your designated study time, you may only consume material directly related to those objectives. If something interesting appears outside that scope, record it on a separate list for future consideration rather than abandoning your plan. This single boundary trains selective attention. Over time, your mind adapts to this structure. You become less reactive. You feel less urgency to comment on every issue or explore every trend. Depth replaces scattered awareness. Clarity also enhances confidence. When you know why you are studying something, motivation stabilizes. You are not learning because it is popular. You are learning because it fits into a larger design. Many people attempt self-education but fail because they confuse activity with alignment. They are busy reading, listening, watching. Yet their efforts are not coordinated. Without a learning filter, even discipline becomes inefficient. The disciplined learner chooses a narrow path and walks it consistently. That path may evolve over time, but at any given moment it is clear. Attention is your most valuable intellectual asset. Clarity decides where it goes. When you protect it with standards and priorities, your learning stops being random exposure and starts becoming structured advancement. Direction reduces noise. Noise reduction increases depth. Depth builds advantage that is difficult to imitate. Clarity tells you what matters. Structure determines how you pursue it. Without structure, even focused learning becomes inconsistent. You study intensely for a week, then drift. You switch topics too quickly. You collect fragments without integration. The solution is to design a personal curriculum. A personal curriculum is a structured, evolving plan of skills and knowledge you intend to acquire. It is not rigid. It adapts as your responsibilities and ambitions change. Yet, at any given time, it gives your learning a backbone. Most people leave their development to circumstance. They react to job demands or immediate problems. Their growth is real but uneven. A personal curriculum replaces reaction with design. Design begins with categories. Think in 3 dimensions: skills, knowledge, and character. Skills are abilities you can practice and measure. Writing clearly, analyzing financial statements, negotiating, public speaking, coding, decision-making under uncertainty. Knowledge is the conceptual foundation behind those skills. Economics, psychology, strategy, history, systems thinking. Character includes internal qualities that shape how you apply skill and knowledge. Patience, precision, courage, emotional control, reliability. When these dimensions are intentionally cultivated, growth becomes balanced. Skill without knowledge becomes mechanical. Knowledge without character becomes fragile. Character without skill becomes ineffective. Structure also requires time framing. Instead of trying to improve everything at once, think in seasons. A season might last 3 months. During that period, you choose one primary skill, one supporting knowledge domain, and one character trait to emphasize. This creates focus without narrowing your development permanently. Consider a software engineer who wants to move into leadership. She identifies her next season as follows: primary skill, clear technical communication, supporting knowledge, organizational behavior, character trait, patience under pressure. For 3 months, her study sessions revolve around these themes. She rewrites technical documentation to improve clarity. She reads case studies on team dynamics. She deliberately slows her responses during tense meetings. By the end of the season, the shift is visible. Her emails are sharper. Her feedback is more structured. Her team feels heard rather than rushed. Instead of vaguely trying to become a better leader, she executed a defined curriculum. A personal curriculum should also distinguish between foundational study and applied practice. Foundational study builds depth. Applied practice turns theory into competence. Both must exist. Reading about negotiation is foundational. Conducting structured mock negotiations or reviewing real conversations is applied practice. When these are linked, progress accelerates. There is another advantage to designing your own curriculum. It reveals gaps. When you attempt to map your growth intentionally, you quickly see what you have been avoiding. Perhaps you have focused heavily on technical expertise while neglecting communication. Perhaps you consume leadership content but avoid difficult conversations. Structure exposes imbalance. To build your curriculum, set aside a quiet hour. Write down the 5 capabilities that would most increase your value over the next 3 years. Narrow that list to 3. For each one, define what competence would look like in observable terms. Then assign one of them as your primary focus for the next season. Identify 2 books, 1 long-form course or equivalent resource, and 1 real-world application project related to it. Schedule recurring study sessions in your calendar and treat them as non-negotiable appointments. At the end of the season, review progress and redesign the next cycle. This process transforms ambition into architecture. A personal curriculum does not remove spontaneity. It channels it. When opportunities arise that align with your current season, you seize them fully. When they do not align, you evaluate them calmly rather than impulsively. Over time, your curriculum becomes layered. Skills build on previous skills. Knowledge deepens instead of restarting. Character strengthens through repeated testing. The world will always try to dictate your learning agenda. Urgent emails, trending topics, sudden demands. A structured curriculum keeps you anchored. It reminds you that development is a long game. When learning is designed, it stops feeling chaotic. It gains rhythm. You know what you are building and why. Clarity chose the direction. Structure now gives that direction durability. Through seasons and cycles, scattered effort becomes deliberate construction. A clear direction and a structured curriculum still depend on one fragile resource: attention. In a distracted world, attention is rare. Notifications interrupt thought. Open tabs fragment focus. Even when alone, the impulse to check, scroll, or switch tasks lingers in the background. Deep progress requires depth of focus. A deep work block is a protected period of undistracted focus dedicated to learning. During this time, your phone is silent and out of reach. Tabs unrelated to the task are closed. There is a single objective, defined in advance. The outside world can wait. This is not about working longer hours. It is about increasing the intensity and quality of the hours you already have. Shallow study feels productive because it fills time. You read a few pages, check a message, highlight a sentence, glance at the news, then return to the book. An hour passes. You feel busy, yet very little has integrated into your thinking. Deep work feels different. The first minutes are often uncomfortable. Your mind searches for escape. It suggests easier tasks. If you remain still and continue, something shifts. The material begins to connect. Questions emerge. You start wrestling with ideas instead of merely observing them. Attention is not just a tool. It is an asset that can be trained or weakened. Every time you allow distraction to interrupt study, you reinforce fragmentation. Every time you resist it, you strengthen concentration. Picture a young attorney preparing for a complex case. Early in her career, she studies in a reactive way. She keeps her email open, responds to messages instantly, and reviews case law in short bursts between calls. She feels constantly behind. 1 month before a major hearing, she changes her approach. Each morning, she schedules a 90-minute deep work block before the office becomes noisy. Phone off. Email closed. A single legal issue per session. At first, the silence feels heavy. By the 3rd week, her analysis sharpens. She anticipates counterarguments. She identifies subtle weaknesses in opposing briefs. In court, her composure stands out. The preparation was invisible, but the result is unmistakable. Deep work creates cognitive endurance. It trains your mind to stay with complexity instead of retreating to simplicity. There are practical elements that make this sustainable. Choose a consistent time of day when your energy is highest. For many, that is early morning. Define the exact task before the session begins. Study Chapter 3 and extract 3 core principles is clear. Work on strategy is vague and invites distraction. Set a fixed duration. 45 to 90 minutes is sufficient for most people. During that window, the only acceptable activity is the predefined task. If you feel restless, you continue. If you feel bored, you continue. Boredom is often the gateway to depth. Environment matters. A clean desk signals singular focus. A specific location associated only with study strengthens habit. Over time, simply sitting in that place triggers concentration. It is also useful to track the number of deep work blocks you complete each week. Not to chase volume, but to build consistency. 3 to 5 strong sessions per week, sustained over months, will outpace scattered effort done daily. To train this skill, begin with a simple commitment. For the next 14 days, schedule 1 deep work block at the same time each weekday. Before each session, write 1 sentence describing what you will accomplish. After each session, write 2 sentences summarizing what you learned or clarified. Do not judge the quality. Judge only whether you honored the boundary. At the end of the 2 weeks, review your notes. You will see tangible progress and, more importantly, evidence that you can control your attention. The ability to focus deeply is becoming a competitive advantage. Many will not cultivate it because distraction feels easier and more entertaining. That is precisely why it is powerful. A structured curriculum provides direction. Deep work provides force. When force is applied consistently in a single direction, movement becomes inevitable. Attention, guarded and trained, turns study from passive reading into mental construction. Over time, the mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate. That shift alone separates the casual learner from the disciplined builder. Focused study creates intensity. Structure creates direction. Yet neither guarantees understanding. Many people read carefully, take notes, and complete courses, but weeks later they struggle to explain what they learned. Information passed through their attention, but it did not transform into usable insight. Understanding requires conversion. Active processing is the act of transforming information through summarizing, questioning, and applying. It is the difference between storing words and building comprehension. When you actively process material, you do not ask, "What did this say?" You ask, "What does this mean, and how does it change the way I think or act?" Passive exposure creates familiarity. Familiarity feels like competence, but it fades quickly. Active processing builds structure in the mind. It forces you to reorganize ideas in your own language. One powerful outcome of active processing is the creation of mental models. Mental models are reusable thinking frameworks that simplify complex decisions. They allow you to recognize patterns across different situations. Instead of memorizing isolated facts, you internalize principles that travel with you. Imagine a marketing analyst studying consumer behavior. She reads a book on decision psychology during her deep work blocks. Instead of highlighting entire pages, she pauses after each chapter and writes a 1-page summary from memory. She explains the core idea as if teaching it to a colleague. She then asks herself how the principle applies to her current campaign. When she learns about loss aversion, she redesigns a pricing page to emphasize what customers might miss rather than what they might gain. Weeks later, in a strategy meeting, she recalls the concept effortlessly and connects it to a new product launch. Her knowledge is no longer trapped in a book. It is embedded in her reasoning. Active processing slows you down in the short term. It may feel inefficient compared to racing through content. Yet what you process deeply, you retain. What you retain, you can use. What you can use becomes advantage. There are simple methods to strengthen this habit. After every study session, close the book or document and write a brief explanation of the key ideas without looking at the source. Gaps will appear immediately. Those gaps show you where understanding is weak. Revisit only those sections and refine your explanation. This cycle turns confusion into clarity. Another method is application mapping. Take a principle you learned and deliberately identify 3 real situations where it could apply. 1 professional, 1 relational, and 1 personal. This forces abstraction. It moves the idea beyond its original context. Questions are also central. Instead of accepting statements at face value, ask, what assumptions support this claim? In what situations would this fail? How does this connect to what I already know? These questions deepen integration and reduce blind acceptance. Active processing also protects you from intellectual fragility. When ideas are merely repeated, they crumble under pressure. When ideas are examined, tested, and connected, they become stable. It is common to underestimate this stage. Many learners believe that reading more is the solution. In reality, processing more is the solution. 10 well-processed pages will serve you longer than 50 skimmed pages. To embed this discipline, choose one notebook or digital document dedicated exclusively to processed insights. After each deep work block, write a short entry in your own words capturing the central principle and one application. Once a week, review previous entries and look for patterns. Notice which ideas recur and which fade. This review strengthens recall and reveals emerging mental models forming across topics. Over time, your notes become less about quotes and more about synthesis. You stop collecting information and start constructing frameworks. Conversations become clearer because your thoughts are organized. Decisions become steadier because they are guided by principles rather than impulse. Learning that is not processed evaporates. Learning that is processed compounds. Attention gave you access to information. Active processing turns that information into architecture inside your mind. With each session, the structure becomes more refined, more connected, and more reliable. Understanding is not an accident. It is built deliberately, one processed idea at a time. Private study builds foundation. Conversation tests it. When ideas remain unspoken, they often feel stronger than they are. In your own mind, your reasoning flows smoothly. There is no interruption, no challenge, no competing perspective. The moment you articulate that reasoning to another person, weaknesses appear. Words expose gaps that silent reflection can hide. Learning through dialogue transforms conversation into refinement. An intellectual feedback loop is the cycle of testing ideas through conversation and correction. You express a thought. Another person questions it, expands it, or disagrees. You adjust. The revised idea becomes sharper than the original. Repeated over time, this loop strengthens judgment. Most conversations never reach this level. They revolve around opinions, updates, or surface commentary. People speak to signal identity or to defend position. Very little learning occurs. Intentional dialogue feels different. You enter the exchange with the aim of clarity, not victory. You are willing to discover that your understanding is incomplete. This requires emotional steadiness. When someone challenges your idea, the ego reacts first. It interprets disagreement as threat. If you let that reaction lead, you defend instead of examine. The intellectual feedback loop collapses. Imagine a product manager presenting a new feature proposal to her team. She has studied user data and built a case for her approach. During the meeting, an engineer questions a core assumption about customer behavior. Her first impulse is to dismiss the objection. Instead, she pauses and asks him to elaborate. As he explains, she realizes she relied on a limited sample set. The discussion uncovers a scenario she had not considered. Rather than weakening her credibility, the adjustment strengthens the final proposal. The feature launches with fewer issues because the idea was stress-tested in dialogue. Conversation, approached this way, becomes a laboratory. There are practical ways to activate this process. Before entering a discussion about an idea you care about, summarize your position in 1 or 2 clear sentences. This forces precision. During the conversation, listen for the strongest counterpoint rather than the weakest. Mentally label it as useful data rather than opposition. When you hear something that challenges you, resist the urge to respond immediately. Ask one clarifying question. Often the initial disagreement is rooted in different definitions or assumptions. Clarification reduces unnecessary friction. It is also valuable to seek out people who think differently from you. Agreement feels comfortable but does not sharpen reasoning. Exposure to competent disagreement reveals blind spots in your logic and forces you to articulate why you believe what you believe. Dialogue is not only external. You can simulate an intellectual feedback loop in writing. After outlining an argument, deliberately write a paragraph attacking your own position from an intelligent critic's perspective. This internal opposition strengthens your thinking before you even speak. To build this habit, choose one idea each week from your personal curriculum and explain it to a colleague or friend. Invite them to question it. Tell them explicitly that you are testing your understanding. During the exchange, take brief notes on objections or refinements. Later, review those notes and update your explanation. Over time, you will notice that your ideas become more concise and resilient. The quality of your learning is reflected in the quality of your conversations. Vague thinking produces vague speech. Structured thinking produces structured dialogue. There is also a relational benefit. When people sense that you are genuinely open to correction, trust increases. They become more willing to share insight. Discussions move beyond surface exchange and into collaborative exploration. Private study builds knowledge. Dialogue tempers it with reality. Each conversation becomes an opportunity to refine rather than to perform. An idea that survives intelligent challenge becomes stronger. An idea that collapses under scrutiny reveals where further study is needed. Both outcomes serve growth. Through repeated cycles of expression, challenge, and adjustment, your thinking evolves from isolated theory into tested understanding. Conversation with peers sharpens ideas. Interaction with experienced individuals accelerates them. There are people who have already walked the path you are studying. They have made mistakes you have not yet encountered. They have seen patterns you are still learning to recognize. Access to their perspective can compress years of trial and error into a single focused exchange. Yet many waste these opportunities. They approach mentors casually. They ask vague questions. They seek motivation instead of precision. The result is predictable. They receive generic advice that changes little. Extracting value from mentors and capable peers requires preparation and respect. Preparation begins before the meeting ever happens. You review your current season of study. You identify specific challenges. You clarify what you have already tried and where your understanding breaks down. This transforms you from a passive recipient into an active participant. Respect is shown through specificity. Instead of saying, "How can I be more successful?" you ask, "In leading cross-functional teams, what early mistakes did you make that slowed your effectiveness?" The second question signals thought. It invites depth. There is also a mindset shift required. The goal is not to impress. It is to extract insight. That means listening more than speaking. It means tolerating feedback that may be uncomfortable. Consider a young consultant who admires a senior partner known for clear strategic thinking. Rather than requesting a general career conversation, he studies several of the partner's past projects. He notes patterns in how recommendations are framed. When they meet, he asks, "I noticed you often simplified complex analyses into 3 core drivers. How do you decide which variables matter most?" The partner pauses, then explains his internal filtering process. He shares how he tests assumptions and eliminates noise before presenting conclusions. The conversation becomes practical and detailed. The consultant leaves with a replicable approach, not just encouragement. Over the next year, he applies that method repeatedly. His own presentations become more focused, and his credibility rises. Precision creates leverage. Another key is timing. Mentors are more willing to invest when they see effort. If you approach them after you have attempted to solve a problem yourself, the discussion becomes collaborative. If you approach them before thinking independently, it becomes remedial. Document what you learn. Immediately after a conversation, write down the key principles and any phrases that captured nuance. Then translate those insights into action steps within your current projects. Advice that is not implemented fades quickly. Peers can also function as micro-mentors in specific domains. A colleague may understand data analysis more deeply than you. Another may excel in negotiation. Instead of viewing them as competition, treat them as resources. Observe their behavior. Ask how they prepare. Request feedback on your approach. It is equally important to protect these relationships. Show appreciation. Follow up with results. If someone offers guidance that improves your performance, let them know how you applied it and what changed. This closes the loop and encourages future exchange. To strengthen this discipline, identify one person whose expertise aligns with your current focus. Before reaching out, write a brief summary of your understanding of the topic and list 3 precise questions. During the conversation, listen without interrupting. Afterward, implement at least one suggestion within 2 weeks. Then send a concise update describing what you tried and what you observed. This pattern builds credibility and deepens access over time. Mentorship is not a one-time event. It is a series of intelligent interactions layered over months or years. The disciplined learner does not wait passively for guidance. He seeks it strategically. He prepares, extracts, applies, and reports back. Experience is expensive when acquired only through personal mistakes. When you learn to draw insight from those who have already paid that cost, your growth accelerates without becoming reckless. Dialogue refines ideas. Mentorship refines direction. Both require humility anchored in purpose. As your ideas strengthen, friction becomes inevitable. The moment you think independently and speak clearly, you will encounter disagreement. Some will be thoughtful. Some will be emotional. Some will be careless. The way you handle these moments determines whether disagreement becomes damage or training. Productive disagreement is not about winning arguments. It is about strengthening reasoning. Structured disagreement is a calm, principle-based exchange of opposing views. It separates the person from the idea. It focuses on assumptions, evidence, and logic rather than tone or status. When practiced consistently, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for intellectual growth. Most people experience disagreement as a threat. Their heart rate increases. Their voice tightens. They search for rebuttals instead of understanding. In that state, learning shuts down. Training begins with restraint. When challenged, pause. Let the other person finish fully. Many conflicts escalate because each side interrupts before the argument is complete. Listening to the full structure of the opposing view reveals where the real disagreement lies. Often it is not the conclusion that differs, but the premises underneath it. Imagine a startup founder discussing pricing strategy with her co-founder. She argues for premium pricing to signal quality. He pushes for lower pricing to capture market share quickly. The discussion grows tense. Instead of repeating her position, she asks him to articulate the assumptions behind his view. He explains that he believes early adoption and rapid feedback are more valuable than immediate margins. She realizes they are optimizing for different priorities: brand perception versus speed of iteration. Once the underlying principles are clear, they can evaluate data aligned with each priority. The disagreement becomes structured rather than personal. They eventually design a tiered pricing model that tests both assumptions. The company benefits because friction was channeled, not suppressed. Emotional control is essential here. Your nervous system may react automatically, but your response does not have to follow. When you notice defensiveness rising, slow your speech. Lower your tone slightly. Ask one clarifying question before offering a counterpoint. This small delay creates space for reasoning to reassert itself. It is also important to represent the opposing view accurately. Before critiquing, summarize their position in your own words and ask if you captured it correctly. This practice builds trust and reduces unnecessary hostility. It signals that you are engaging seriously, not caricaturing their argument. Structured disagreement requires intellectual honesty. If the other side presents a valid point, acknowledge it openly. This does not weaken you. It strengthens the credibility of your remaining claims. There will be moments when the other person is not interested in structure. They may argue emotionally or dismissively. Even then, you can maintain discipline. Keep your focus on principles. If the exchange becomes unproductive, disengage without resentment. Not every disagreement deserves extended energy. To build this capacity, choose a topic within your field where reasonable people disagree. Study both sides carefully. Write a short argument supporting one position, then write an equally strong argument for the other. Notice how this exercise expands your understanding. Later, in real conversations, practice summarizing opposing views before defending your own. Over time, this becomes instinctive. Disagreement, handled well, sharpens judgment. It exposes weak reasoning before the real world does. It prepares you for higher stakes decisions where consequences matter. Avoiding disagreement may feel peaceful, but it limits growth. Seeking conflict for its own sake is equally unproductive. The disciplined path lies between those extremes. When you remain calm, precise, and principle-focused in the face of opposition, you signal maturity. People may not always agree with you, but they will recognize steadiness. Ideas tested in structured friction become durable. They are less likely to collapse under pressure because they have already been challenged. Through repeated exposure to disagreement handled with discipline, you develop confidence that does not depend on consensus. You trust your reasoning because it has survived examination. Ideas refined in calm discussion face a different test when the stakes rise. A quiet exchange over coffee is one thing. Presenting a recommendation to senior leadership, defending a proposal in front of a skeptical client, or responding to sharp questions in a public forum is another. Pressure changes the body. Heart rate increases. Thoughts race. Precision can disappear. The ability to remain clear in these moments is not accidental. It is trained. Cognitive composure is the ability to think clearly under social or intellectual pressure. It is not the absence of nerves. It is the capacity to operate effectively despite them. High-stakes environments expose the structure of your preparation. If your understanding is shallow, pressure will reveal it. If your reasoning is organized, it will hold. One common mistake under pressure is over-talking. When challenged, people often respond with excessive detail, hoping volume will compensate for uncertainty. In reality, this signals instability. Composure is reflected in concise, structured answers. Preparation begins before the event. For any important presentation or meeting, identify the 3 core points you must communicate. Reduce each to a single sentence. Then anticipate the most difficult questions that could be asked. Prepare brief, principle-based responses rather than memorized scripts. This creates flexibility. Picture a finance manager presenting a cost reduction strategy to executives. The proposal will affect multiple departments. He knows resistance is likely. In the weeks before the meeting, he studies the numbers deeply and organizes his case around 3 pillars: sustainability, efficiency, and long-term competitiveness. He practices explaining each pillar in simple language. He also lists potential objections, especially around morale and operational risk. When the meeting begins, questions come quickly. One executive challenges the timeline. Another questions assumptions about supplier behavior. Because he anticipated these lines of inquiry, he does not scramble. He listens fully, pauses, and responds by returning to the core pillars. Even when he admits uncertainty in one area, he outlines how he plans to gather additional data. The room remains attentive. The proposal moves forward with minor revisions. His composure increases trust. Pressure also amplifies internal dialogue. A critical voice may whisper that you are not ready. If you fight that voice directly, it often grows louder. A more effective approach is acknowledgement followed by focus. Notice the anxiety without dramatizing it. Then shift attention to the next concrete step in the conversation. Physical habits influence cognitive clarity. Before speaking, take one slow breath. Feel your feet grounded. Slow your pace slightly. These small actions regulate your nervous system and stabilize thought. Another key principle is structure under fire. When asked a complex question, avoid answering immediately in fragments. Take a moment and outline your response verbally. You might say, "There are two factors to consider." Then address them one at a time. This signals order and gives your mind a roadmap. Silence is not weakness. A brief pause before responding communicates deliberation. It also prevents reactive statements you may later regret. To strengthen this capacity, simulate pressure intentionally. Rehearse presentations in front of a colleague who is instructed to interrupt with challenging questions. Record yourself answering and review the footage. Notice where your voice speeds up or your structure collapses. Practice condensing long explanations into tighter forms without losing substance. Over time, the unfamiliar becomes familiar. Cognitive composure grows through exposure. Each high-stakes interaction becomes training for the next. Instead of fearing these moments, view them as proving grounds. There will still be instances where you stumble. You may forget a point or misstate a detail. Composure includes recovery. Correct yourself calmly and continue. Most audiences care more about steadiness than perfection. When you can think clearly while others become reactive, you stand out. Decisions are made in these moments. Reputations are shaped in these moments. Pressure does not create character or clarity. It reveals them. Through preparation, structured thinking, and controlled responses, you ensure that what is revealed reflects depth rather than panic. Calm reasoning under scrutiny is rare. Rarity, sustained over time, becomes authority. Knowledge tested in dialogue and refined under pressure reaches a higher level when you attempt to teach it. Explaining an idea to another person exposes the exact depth of your understanding. Vague comprehension collapses quickly when someone asks for clarification. Clear understanding becomes simpler, not more complicated, when spoken aloud. The teaching effect is the clarity gained by explaining concepts to others. When you teach, you are forced to organize, prioritize, and translate. This process reveals gaps that private study can conceal. Many people avoid teaching because they believe they must first become experts. In reality, teaching at any level accelerates expertise. You do not need to be the foremost authority. You need to be one step ahead of the person you are helping and honest about the limits of your knowledge. Teaching disciplines your thinking. To explain a complex idea, you must identify its core components. You must distinguish essential principles from supporting details. You must anticipate confusion and address it directly. Consider an operations supervisor who has been studying process optimization as part of her personal curriculum. She understands the frameworks privately, but they remain abstract. When a new team member joins, she volunteers to walk him through the workflow. As she explains bottlenecks and feedback loops, she notices where her own language becomes fuzzy. She cannot clearly justify one of the metrics she has been using. After the session, she revisits her notes and realizes she adopted that metric without fully examining its assumptions. She adjusts her approach. Weeks later, the team's efficiency improves because her understanding became more precise through teaching. Teaching does not require a classroom. It can occur in meetings, informal conversations, written summaries, or short internal presentations. What matters is the intention to clarify for someone else's benefit. The act of teaching also strengthens retention. When you reorganize information into your own structure, you reinforce neural pathways. The idea becomes part of your active vocabulary rather than passive memory. There is another advantage. Teaching builds credibility. When you consistently articulate ideas clearly and responsibly, others begin to associate you with depth. This reputation is not built through self-promotion, but through service. Effective teaching relies on simplicity. If you cannot explain a concept in straightforward language, your grasp of it is likely incomplete. Complexity is sometimes necessary, but clarity is always necessary. A useful practice is to create short explanations of what you are studying each week. Choose one principle and write a brief summary as if preparing to teach it to a beginner. Avoid jargon. Use one practical example. Then, if possible, share it with a colleague or friend and invite questions. Notice where they struggle. Refine your explanation accordingly. Over time, these micro-lessons become a personal library of clarified insight. Teaching also forces humility. When someone asks a question you cannot answer, the appropriate response is not improvisation. It is acknowledgement followed by further study. This reinforces your intellectual standard and models integrity. In professional environments, those who can both execute and explain become indispensable. Execution without explanation limits influence. Explanation without execution lacks credibility. Teaching integrates both. There is a rhythm that emerges. You study deeply. You process actively. You test ideas in dialogue. You handle disagreement with structure. You remain composed under pressure. Then you teach. Each stage strengthens the next. Eventually, you begin to think in teachable units. As you read or observe, you ask yourself how you would explain this clearly to someone else. This question alone deepens attention and processing. When knowledge is hoarded, it stagnates. When it is articulated, it sharpens. Teaching transforms learning from a private advantage into shared value. In doing so, it locks the insight more firmly into your own mind. Over time, the way you learn begins to shape the way you are perceived. Depth is not announced. It is recognized. A reputation for depth is built through consistent signals. The way you speak in meetings, the way you respond to questions, the way you admit uncertainty, the way you prepare. Each interaction leaves an impression, and impressions accumulate. Building a reputation for depth is not about appearing intelligent. It is about demonstrating thoughtfulness, rigor, and reliability over long periods of time. An intellectual standard governs this process internally. It is a personal benchmark for depth, accuracy, and rigor. When your internal standard is high, your external behavior reflects it. You verify before sharing. You resist exaggeration. You avoid commenting on subjects you have not examined carefully. Many people damage their credibility by speaking too quickly and too broadly. They offer strong opinions on limited information. They repeat headlines as conclusions. In contrast, a person with depth speaks less frequently but with greater precision. Imagine a senior analyst in a large organization. In meetings, others often speculate about market trends based on recent news. He listens carefully. When he speaks, he references long-term data patterns and clarifies what is known versus what is assumed. On several occasions he says, "I don't have enough information to draw a conclusion yet." Initially, this restraint surprises people. Over time, it builds trust. When he does express a firm view, colleagues lean in. His words carry weight because they are not constant or careless. Consistency is central. One insightful comment does not create a reputation. Repeated disciplined behavior does. Reliability is another component. If you commit to researching a question and returning with an answer, you follow through. If you present analysis, it is organized and supported. Over months and years, people begin to associate your name with thoroughness. A reputation for depth also requires patience. Recognition may lag behind effort. In environments that reward speed and visibility, quiet rigor can feel overlooked. Yet depth compounds quietly. As responsibilities increase, those who are trusted with complex decisions are rarely the loudest voices. They are the steadiest. There is also a social dimension. Treat others' ideas with seriousness. Even when you disagree, engage with the substance rather than dismissing the person. This reinforces that your standard applies to yourself first and to others with respect. To cultivate this reputation intentionally, adopt one simple rule in professional discussions. Before contributing, ask yourself whether your comment adds clarity, evidence, or structure. If it does not, consider listening instead. When you do contribute, aim to frame your thoughts in organized segments. For example, outline 2 risks and 1 opportunity rather than speaking in a stream of impressions. After meetings, reflect briefly on whether your contributions met your own intellectual standard. Adjust accordingly. Written communication is equally important. Emails, reports, and messages should reflect the same rigor as spoken words. Clear subject lines, logical flow, concise language. Sloppiness in writing signals sloppiness in thinking. Over time, Your presence begins to influence group dynamics. Others may prepare more carefully when they know you will ask precise questions. Standards rise subtly around you. There is no need to declare expertise. Depth, demonstrated consistently, speaks for itself. Trust grows when people see that you value accuracy over ego, preparation over impulse, and substance over noise. That trust opens doors to greater responsibility and broader influence. Self-education began as a private discipline. It now expresses itself publicly through the way you show up. Quiet study transforms into visible credibility. Reputation is not built in a single dramatic moment. It is constructed through hundreds of small, disciplined choices. When those choices align with a high intellectual standard, depth becomes your signature. As your standards rise and your reputation strengthens, a new challenge emerges. Opportunity increases. Invitations appear. New projects surface. Articles, interviews, and debates compete for your attention. The very progress you work to achieve now creates additional noise. Without discipline, growth turns into dilution. Strategic ignorance becomes essential. Strategic ignorance is the deliberate refusal to consume low-value information. It is also the deliberate refusal to pursue misaligned opportunities, even when they appear attractive. It recognizes that every yes carries a hidden cost. The modern environment rewards reactivity. Breaking news, constant updates, endless commentary. There is pressure to have an opinion on everything and to participate in every conversation. This behavior fragments focus and erodes depth. Depth requires exclusion. Consider a mid-level executive who has built a strong reputation for thoughtful analysis. As her visibility grows, she is invited to join multiple committees, speak on panels, and contribute to cross-functional initiatives. Each request seems beneficial. Each one flatters her sense of importance. For a few months, she accepts most of them. Her calendar fills. Study time shrinks. Preparation becomes rushed. She notices a subtle decline in the quality of her thinking. Meetings feel reactive instead of deliberate. After reflection, she decides to step back. She identifies the two initiatives most aligned with her long-term direction and withdraws from the rest. She limits media consumption to specific, scheduled intervals rather than constant checking. Within weeks, her mental clarity returns. The reduction in activity increases the quality of her contribution. Strategic ignorance is not withdrawal from the world. It is selective engagement with it. There is a difference between being informed and being saturated. Saturation produces anxiety and shallow commentary. Informed focus produces measured insight. This principle applies beyond information. It applies to skills as well. Once you have defined your personal curriculum and current season, you must resist the temptation to add new tracks prematurely. A new subject may be interesting, but if it does not align with your direction, it becomes distraction. The discipline lies in saying, "Not now." There is also emotional resistance to ignoring. You may fear missing an opportunity that others seize. You may worry that stepping back signals lack of ambition. In reality, disciplined exclusion signals seriousness. It shows that your time and attention are allocated intentionally. To practice this, conduct a weekly audit of your inputs. List the primary sources of information you consumed over the past 7 days. Evaluate each against your learning filter. Did it deepen a core skill or knowledge area? Did it support your long-term direction? If not, reduce or eliminate it for the coming week. Replace that time with focused study or reflection. Apply the same audit to commitments. For each ongoing obligation, ask whether it aligns with your intellectual standard and growth trajectory. If it does not, consider delegating, declining, or redefining your involvement. Silence is a strategic asset. When your mind is not constantly filled with external voices, your own reasoning becomes clearer. Original thought requires space. There is power in being slightly less available. When you do engage, you bring full attention. When you do speak, it is deliberate. When you do commit, it is with depth. Over years, this pattern compounds. Others may chase every trend and exhaust themselves. You move steadily, building expertise layer by layer. The world will continue to produce more information than you can consume. Accept this fully. You are not meant to master everything. You are meant to master what matters for your path. Strategic ignorance protects that path. It preserves the conditions necessary for deep work, thoughtful dialogue, and sustained growth. Clarity chose direction. Structure organized it. Focus strengthened it. Dialogue refined it. Teaching reinforced it. Reputation expressed it. Now exclusion protects it. What you ignore is as important as what you pursue. The disciplined days begin to accumulate. At first, progress feels modest. A few deep work blocks each week. A notebook filling slowly with processed insights. Conversations that are slightly sharper than before. There is no dramatic transformation. Only steady movement. Then time begins to amplify the effect. Compounding knowledge is the exponential growth that occurs when learning builds on itself daily. Each new concept connects to previous ones. Each skill strengthens another. What once required effort becomes instinct. The pace of understanding increases because the foundation beneath it is stronger. Most people underestimate time. They overestimate what can be achieved in a month and underestimate what can be achieved in 5 years of consistent discipline. Compounding is quiet. It does not announce itself. It works beneath the surface, linking ideas across seasons of study. Imagine an engineer who commits to 1 hour of structured self-education each weekday. In the first year, she focuses on technical mastery. She deepens her understanding of systems architecture and writes detailed summaries after each session. In the second year, she shifts to communication and leadership principles, applying them in team settings. In the third year, she studies business strategy and financial literacy, connecting technical decisions to organizational outcomes. None of these years contain a viral achievement. There is no sudden leap. Yet by the end of the third year, her thinking has transformed. She sees trade-offs others miss. She anticipates long-term consequences. Senior leaders begin involving her in strategic discussions. Her advantage was not brilliance in a single moment. It was the accumulation of disciplined days. Compounding knowledge relies on continuity. When study is sporadic, connections weaken. When it is steady, even at modest volume, integration strengthens. Patience becomes essential. There will be periods when progress feels slow. You may question whether your efforts are sufficient. This is where long-term thinking stabilizes you. You are not studying for immediate applause. You are building capacity that will reveal itself over time. Review reinforces compounding. Periodically revisiting past notes and frameworks deepens retention. Old insights take on new meaning when viewed through a more advanced lens. What once seemed abstract becomes practical. What once felt complex becomes intuitive. There is also an emotional component. Consistent learning builds quiet confidence. Not arrogance, but grounded assurance. You know you have invested hours. You know you have tested ideas. This internal evidence reduces comparison and anxiety. To strengthen the compounding effect, schedule a quarterly reflection. Set aside an hour to review the previous 3 months of study and application. Identify the most important principles you absorbed. Write a short synthesis connecting them. Notice patterns emerging across different domains. Then define the next season in a way that builds naturally on what you have already constructed. This deliberate linking prevents fragmentation. It is helpful to think in decades rather than weeks. Where do you want your judgment to be 10 years from now? What problems do you want to be capable of solving? When you extend the horizon, daily discipline feels less burdensome and more strategic. Compounding knowledge also protects you during uncertainty. Industries shift. Roles change. External conditions fluctuate. A deep, layered foundation allows adaptation. You are not dependent on a single skill or trend. You possess transferable insight. The temptation to rush will appear repeatedly. You will see others rise quickly through visibility or timing. Some will succeed without obvious depth. Resist the urge to abandon your path. Quick gains without foundation are unstable. Depth, once established, endures. Years from now, the difference between those who consumed casually and those who studied deliberately will be unmistakable. It will show in the quality of their decisions, the steadiness of their leadership, and the scope of problems they can handle. Small daily sessions may appear insignificant in isolation. In sequence, they become transformative. Time rewards structure. It magnifies discipline. When knowledge compounds, mastery stops being an aspiration and becomes a trajectory. As knowledge compounds and your capabilities expand, a deeper shift takes place. You no longer see learning as something you do. You see it as who you are. Intellectual identity is the self-image of a disciplined learner. It is the internal narrative that says, I am someone who studies, thinks carefully, and improves deliberately. When this identity stabilizes, discipline requires less force. Behavior aligns naturally with belief. In the beginning, effort is driven by goals. You schedule deep work blocks because you want advancement. You process ideas because you want clarity. Over time, repetition shapes identity. The habits become evidence. You have studied consistently for years. You have tested ideas in dialogue. You have refined your standards. The proof accumulates. Identity reinforcement is the practice of aligning habits and environment with who you believe you are becoming. It strengthens the loop between action and self-concept. When your surroundings and routines confirm your identity, consistency becomes easier. Consider a senior project director who has practiced disciplined self-education for nearly a decade. Early in his career, he forced himself to read at night instead of watching television. He scheduled study sessions reluctantly. Now, the pattern is automatic. His office contains well-worn notebooks filled with processed insights. His calendar protects thinking time without internal debate. When confronted with a complex problem, his instinct is to research and reflect rather than react emotionally. Colleagues describe him as thoughtful and measured. He no longer tries to become that person. He is that person because his repeated actions shaped his identity. This stage is subtle but powerful. When learning is part of your identity, distractions lose some of their appeal. Casual consumption feels inconsistent with who you are. Sloppy thinking feels uncomfortable. You hold yourself to a standard not because someone is watching, but because it aligns with your self-image. Environment plays a decisive role. The books on your desk, the notes you revisit, the people you engage with regularly, all reinforce or weaken identity. If you surround yourself with shallow commentary and constant distraction, maintaining a disciplined identity becomes harder. If you design your environment intentionally, your habits require less willpower. There is also a relational dimension. The way you respond to challenges signals your identity to others. When faced with uncertainty, you seek understanding rather than blame. When corrected, you adjust without defensiveness. These behaviors communicate that growth matters more than ego. To strengthen intellectual identity, perform a simple exercise. Write a brief description of the type of thinker and learner you aim to be in 5 years. Be specific about qualities such as rigor, patience, clarity, and composure. Then review your daily habits and environment. Identify one adjustment that would better align your actions with that description. It may be reorganizing your workspace, refining your study schedule, or reducing exposure to low-quality inputs. Implement that adjustment immediately. Small environmental shifts can solidify identity faster than abstract resolutions. Identity also influences long-term trust. When others see that your behavior is consistent across contexts, they rely on you more readily. They know your standards do not fluctuate with mood or pressure. There will still be moments of fatigue. Identity does not eliminate difficulty. It provides orientation. Even when motivation dips, your sense of self pulls you back to disciplined action. Eventually, self-education stops feeling like effort layered onto life. It becomes integrated into how you approach everything. Conversations, projects, setbacks, successes, all are processed through the lens of a learner committed to refinement. Compounding knowledge built your capability. Intellectual identity protects and directs it. When who you are and what you do are aligned, growth becomes sustainable. The disciplined learner is no longer chasing improvement. He is embodying it. A system only matters if it endures. Years of disciplined self-education will change your thinking, your opportunities, and your influence. Yet the final test is sustainability. Can you maintain curiosity and rigor without burning out? Can you adapt as your life evolves? The lifelong blueprint is not a rigid schedule. It is a rhythm. Rhythm balances intensity with renewal. There will be seasons of accelerated study when responsibilities demand rapid growth. There will also be seasons of consolidation when reflection and application matter more than new input. Recognizing this prevents exhaustion. Curiosity must remain active. When learning becomes mechanical, depth declines. Curiosity is not random consumption. It is a focused openness to better explanations, stronger evidence, and more refined models. It keeps your thinking flexible. Adaptability is equally important. The skills that defined your early career may not be sufficient later. Industries shift. Technology evolves. Your responsibilities expand from execution to leadership. A lifelong blueprint allows recalibration without abandoning principles. You revisit your personal curriculum. You adjust your seasons. You redefine core capabilities while preserving disciplined structure. Imagine a professional who began with technical mastery as his primary focus. Over a decade, he became known for analytical depth. As he moved into executive leadership, he recognized that strategy and culture now mattered more than technical detail. Instead of clinging to his original strengths, he redesigned his curriculum. He studied organizational design, decision-making under uncertainty, and long-term capital allocation. He maintained deep work blocks, but the content evolved. His identity as a disciplined learner remained constant, even as the material changed. This adaptability allowed him to lead at a higher level without losing rigor. The lifelong blueprint also integrates recovery. Continuous strain weakens clarity. Periodic breaks from structured study, used for reflection or creative thought, refresh the mind. Renewal is not abandonment. It is maintenance. There is a simple way to sustain this rhythm. At the end of each year, conduct a personal review. Examine what you studied, what you applied, and what produced meaningful results. Identify areas where curiosity faded or structure weakened. Then design the next year with 3 guiding themes aligned with your evolving responsibilities. Schedule thinking time before the year begins. Protect it as carefully as any professional obligation. Long-term growth also depends on community. Surround yourself with people who value thoughtfulness and disciplined improvement. Conversations with such individuals prevent stagnation. They challenge assumptions and expose you to perspectives you might overlook alone. As influence increases, responsibility follows. The knowledge you compound is not solely for personal advancement. It shapes decisions that affect others. The lifelong blueprint includes ethical awareness. It requires you to examine not only what works, but what is right. Depth without integrity erodes trust. There will be periods when progress feels invisible. External recognition may fluctuate. What remains constant is the internal structure you have built. You know how to clarify direction. You know how to focus deeply. You know how to process ideas, test them in dialogue, handle disagreement, perform under pressure, and teach with clarity. These are transferable capabilities. Mastery is not a finish line. It is a trajectory sustained by rhythm. The world will continue to accelerate. Information will multiply. Noise will compete for your attention. Those who rely on passive consumption will feel increasingly scattered. Those who maintain a deliberate daily system will feel increasingly grounded. The blueprint is simple in design and demanding in execution. Decide to be self-taught. Choose direction. Structure your curriculum. Protect deep focus. Process actively. Test ideas through dialogue. Learn from mentors. Engage in disciplined disagreement. Remain composed under pressure. Teach what you know. Uphold high standards. Ignore what does not matter. Trust compounding. Embody the identity. Renew the rhythm. Years from now, the results will be visible in the quality of your judgment and the steadiness of your leadership. Daily self-education, sustained with patience and integrity, separates those who merely keep up from those who quietly outlearn almost everyone around them.